Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
Well, good morning, everyone. I have to tell you that today is Sunday for me. It's funny how our conceptual mind works. Must have been the last time I was asked to give a Dharma talk. It must have been on a Sunday. So I was preparing Saturday night and had my usual ritual on Sunday morning of cleaning up my notes. And then, so literally from yesterday till today, it's been Saturday and Sunday, and I'm literally driving here, and to me, it's Sunday. And I'm surprised to see that the parking lot's full with the businesses are occupied and all that. So welcome to my Sunday. So today, I wanted to, what you get from me, especially if I'm asked to do a Dharma talk on somewhat short notices, you get where I'm at. You get where I am. The world according to Joe is what you'll get. But for me, what's been emerging and coming to light has been the value of practice. So I want to focus on that a little bit today. But of course, in order to understand the value of Buddhist practice, we need to kind of set up the problem we're trying to solve. So we'll do that a little bit to start off. So the problem, the Buddhists tell us that we exist in a state of suffering due to our attachment to impermanent phenomenon, really, really, really strong belief in a solid, separate, permanent self. So much so that because of that belief in a solid, separate self, we go about our lives exhibiting what could be summarized as greed and hatred. Sounds horrible, but really those are just placeholders for a desire and attachment and aversion, right, to things we don't want. So things we want, things we don't want, and we attach and we cling and we go after these things, and then we sort of maybe see them differently, and we become dissatisfied. And this is how we go through all of life. But it's got to do with this this delusion of this solid separate self, which in some teachings is called self-attachment. And that this is the cause of suffering in the world. Now, as we have gone through our lives before we encountered Buddhism, we might have felt like things are going pretty well. You know, relatively speaking, even if things weren't so good, maybe in our family or whatever, we got out, we got a career, you know, something good happened, and you know, we're making the best of it, and things are okay. But the Buddha says we spend pretty much our entire life focused on these 8 worldly concerns. You can rely on the Buddha to boil things down, right? He's got the 3 poisons. That's the whole reason for us being here. The whole reason for suffering are these 3 things: greed, hatred, and delusion. And then here's how we spend our lives, right? Chasing either gain or loss, right? We love to get new things. We hate to lose things. Pleasure and pain. We like the pleasure, don't like the pain so much. So we spend our lives sort of, you know, either being buffeted by pain we can't avoid. And so that's a struggle. Or chasing pleasure that we can't always achieve, but even when we do, seems to sort of diminish in its value over time. Praise and blame. Love getting praise. Hate getting blamed, right? So there's these opposites, this duality that we're faced with, this, and then fame and disgrace. And each of these is their own world in and of themselves. That if we take up fame as like we want fame, it's going to dictate a whole life, and it's going to have all of its own ramifications. And yet, at the end of it all, whether we had all this gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disgrace, everything that we cling to and attach to, we can't take with us when we leave. And we all leave. We all leave. It's guaranteed we all leave. That's a scientific fact. We will leave. The one thing we do take with us is karma. So the effects of our kind of greedy, hateful, deluded actions, and how those ripple out into the world. And it turns out that since we were the initiator, the cause of those effects, we own them in some way that we don't quite understand. They're attached to us. We own them. And that's our karma. And in some way or another, those things make their way back to us to sometimes re-experience, and if we're smart, learn from and learn to resolve. So it's interesting when you think about karma and this idea of cause and effect, and that we own all of this that we do out in the world. It's kind of funny. We're Buddhists now. We're comfortable here. We feel like this is a wisdom path, and it's very practical. But a lot of us come from religions where we used to worry about Judgment Day. Judgment Day, right? We don't want to hear about that. So a lot of times that caused us to shun the religion altogether, because we didn't want to, you know, be thinking about being held accountable for our actions all the time. It was just too much. Well, it turns out in Buddhism, Judgment Day is every day, because the results of our actions can come back to us in this lifetime. They can come back to us a week later, a day later, a minute later. So this problem, right? Not only do we suffer, but then we've got the accumulation of this suffering that sort of stays with us until we kind of see our way to resolving it. So the solution, we have the Buddhist path. And in any spiritual path, we're typically given practices. They're designed to help us, see the problem, whatever the problem is that religion is espousing, and move beyond it. Wisdom teachings. At first, the practices can seem kind of obscure. Like, really? Like, this is going to work? I'm suffering in this way. How is that going to help? But the good news is that in the early going, when we're first exposed to Buddhism, when I was first exposed to Buddhism, things made sense. They seemed easy to adopt. It had to do with, seemingly good psychology and, working with our behaviors to help us not do so much harm, focus more on doing what's right, and not doing so much harm to others. Well, it seems worthwhile. I pick that up. So we had things like, the precepts and the 10 wholesome actions, focused on like right speech, right thought, the 5 hindrances. So we're able to kind of pick some of these up and we get drawn in. So now we're drawn in and we decide, well, we'll give this a try. We may pick up the precepts and we say, all right, I'll work with these. I'll work with these. Nevertheless, what ends up happening right away is we quickly start to encounter resistance stemming from attachments we didn't know we had, and that we might not be ready to give up, at least not right now. So we give this a try. We're willing to give it a try. We're sort of giving it a try, but we run into this resistance and we run into these things that, well, I'm sure they don't mean that. I'm sure they don't mean that. And so we go along, and this is how we go along. And when you come into a place like this is kind of what everybody's doing. We're all at different places on the path. We've all either just getting started or we've been at it a while, and we've been going through this process of being attached, having some practices suggested to us, and then adopting them as we can, right? Doing what we can. Of course, all this doing what we can, all this assessing that we're doing, what we're ready for, we're not ready for, is being done with a mind that is self-attached, self-interested, prioritizing, self-prioritizing, self-defending, considers itself completely separate from everything else, and by the way, better than everyone and everything around it. So this is the mind you're trying to work with as you're getting these suggestions for practices that might make you a little more focused on the happiness of others. Sounds like a good idea, but we just don't know what we're made of. And so we encounter that on the path. And we all go about our way to try to work that out. But in my experience, if we've even taken a single precept for consideration and decided to put it into practice, we'll start to see where we are. Start to see those attachments. We become aware of ourselves. We start to become aware of our preferences, dislikes, resistances. We start to become mindful. The hook is in. Even if we say Buddhism's not for us, the hook is in. We got exposed to looking at ourselves. The hook is in. It's doubtful that we'll completely never pick something up again. but we may not be ready right now. And this is how it goes, you know, because this is all pretty risky to this sense of self that is, I mean, its job is to protect and defend its integrity. That's its job. So this is all pretty risky stuff. We might have been thinking about, you know, we're dropping it before we even start sometimes. Am I ready to open Pandora's box? Is kind of what it feels like. So we're all somewhere in our adoption of a path, of spiritual path that we're told can lead us out of suffering. And at this point, we may not even realize that we suffer. So that's right. So we don't even see that. I didn't see it. Oh, what do I need that for? I'm not suffering. So I'm thinking automatically of people that have bad families or struggling in some way, or, you know, living on the street. You know, this suffering, or in a war zone, that's suffering. But I'm not suffering. I have a house, a job, wife, you know, I'm not suffering. So one of the things you'll notice around here is that because of this condition we're all in, where we're self-attached, and we're not self-attached until we're like a Buddha, right? So we're all self-attached at some level, that we're all very gentle with one another. Nobody's pushing anybody. You notice that? You're completely free when you walk in here. You know, when I when I first started attending Dharma over at the old Heartwood location, I was in and out like a flash because, you know, the experience of even going to the hardware store and having somebody ask me, do you need any help? Do you have everything you need? Was, you go into a church and they want to bring you into the fold. How can we, we want to join the club and all that sort of thing. So we're worried about that. Why? Because we're attached, we're comfortable the way we are. We're sort of interested in this, but we don't want to just jump in whole hog. We got to protect ourselves, right? But we've all gone through that. If we're Dharma practitioners, we've all gone through that. So you're sitting here with a group of cultivators, the Dharma practitioners, who have started from the beginning, just like you might be now. And so they remember all that resistance. They can see it, and they can see where we're at. The more experienced ones can see the beginners. Then they walk in and they treat them with kid gloves. So much love. It's because we know that this is a delicate situation. If we push too hard, even with our own desire to move forward with the practice, we can turn ourselves off. This is how tricky the mind is. So, so at some point, eventually, we get to where we're around and where we've taken up a few things. Maybe we're just coming to listen to Dharma talks. That's what I did, for quite a while. I just came in, listened to a Dharma talk, and left. That sounded good. I'll try that this week, and but eventually the teaching starts to get around to this idea that we suffer and we don't know it, right? So they were like, really? Life is good. I'm trying to improve my life here. I'm not really trying to go into any kind of pain. But we do learn, if we pick up any of the practices, they are designed to show us not only that we suffer, but that we suffer due to our attachments. And that the way we're spending our life is leading to that suffering. So in my case, like I said, Sue and I moved here. My wife, Sue and I moved here to Hendersonville she'd got an inkling that there was such a thing as Heartwood from a friend of hers at work who lived in Tennessee and learned that we were planning this move to Hendersonville. And he said, Hendersonville? You're so lucky. I go there for retreats. So he'd come from Nashville and come to retreats. You're so lucky that you're going to be near Heartwood. So we had no idea what that was. So we came here, and eventually Sue actually was the first one to come. And but from my perspective, I'm coming. I'm curious. I've had some experience with spiritual practice in the past. And so I dip my toe in the water and I come and I listen to Dharma talks and don't really interact much. And, I'm kind of out the door as quickly as I came in the door. And inevitably, there's talk of precepts and things that make sense. Doing introspection around what's beneficial and not beneficial, both for yourself and for others. And start to kind of take things up, get curious, kind of investigate what I don't know. I hear a lot of words I don't know, terms, concepts, suttas. Heard enough suttas that said, man, I should have the suttas. So literally that library that you guys have out there with all the orange books in it, I have that.
Collecting a lot of that, right?
So, it's how a guy like me gets started, right? Because again, we're all where we are, we're all coming from where we've been, and we all have the minds that we have, and we're going to approach this the way that, makes sense to us until we see something different, still we see differently. And that's what's so great about this place is that we don't judge one another. We know that we're all carrying around a completely unique mind. We're not trying to be zombies, and all copy one another. We're trying to get our own real sort of true essence and authenticity through who we are now. And that's unique to us. So, but by and by, this awareness starts to build. And I start to realize, oh, this kind of common feeling that I have must be what they mean by suffering. It's a very common feeling that I have. That must be what they mean by suffering. It's like I feel tension or I worry. Sometimes the worry keeps me up at night, and that lack of sleep feels horrible the next day. Well, that's suffering. Wow, I am suffering. Maybe the Buddha's right. So, well, long story short, after 6 years of being involved with Heartwood, listening to Dharma talks, following the transition from largely a Theravada focus to kind of the second and third turnings of the wheel, as they say, Mahayana teachings, Vajrayana teachings, the Bodhisattva path. I've adopted some practices by this time. I've got an altar, set of preliminary Dharma practices that I do, refuge and offerings. And overall, a period of Dharma that makes up the beginning of each day that feels like by the time I'm done, the day's complete. Hasn't even started. From a worldly perspective. But But it really, really, really feels like all I needed to do on any given day is that. Then the rest of the day is right. Then I'm prepared and the rest of the day is right. I've set my freedom and now I walk in it for the rest of the day. It doesn't matter what comes up for the rest of it. It doesn't matter what I have to do the rest of the day. It doesn't matter what might come up that I didn't expect, even trouble. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm free. Free of, I don't know what anymore, because it's been 6 years and this is built little by little by little. And attachments have been severed little by little by little. And I don't have a log to keep track of the ones that have gone. And there have been experiences that I've had where whole chunks of them went out at once because I realized something. I don't even know what they were, but I know they're gone because I feel free. Or I run into a situation and I go, I would have been different here before. Somehow that's not there. Somehow that tension's not there. Something happened. So this is a path of transformation that we're on. And the practices are the way we transform. If we try to tackle the problems in the world at a worldly level, with a worldly mind, then we can see how that works. All we have to do is turn on the news. We can see how that works. Some really smart people in the world working with this stuff. But the problems, even when they're solved, seem to resurface. How is that? So there's this idea that in Buddhism, we practice to transform ourselves with our ordinary mind. We don't fully understand. When we embark on this path, we don't fully understand what transformation looks like. We don't know what the end looks like. But it sounds good each time we come to Dharma. And that thing, I think, is worthwhile. And then the Bodhisattva path comes along and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what? So you're saying that this is a path where I might actually want to come back instead of going on at the end of this life in order to help others make maybe some of the progress I made? Really? Whoa, you talk about resistance, you talk about attachments coming to light. Whoa, wait a minute, right? Then you realize you're self-attached real quick. But as I've been working with this, I realized that as I've witnessed the power of the practices to erode my attachment, my self-attachment, my attachment to things, my attachment to circumstances, or whatever it is, that I know that I'm moving towards a mind that I don't have, I haven't experienced. But I can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel because I'm even while I'm still bound, I'm starting to see freedom. And I can kind of plot this out and kind of see where this might go. And that if self-attachment completely goes, then am I going to really care whether I come back to this world again in some other form? Am I going to really care about that? Joe cares about that. But at some point, Joe, either because of death or because I come to some great realization in this lifetime, which they say is possible, Joe's not going to be here to worry about it. So there's going to be I'm going after becoming my true essence, which they say is not self-attached and not attached to dharmas, but yet exists and can work in the world, can even create. Amitabha created an entire world for people to go to, right? That's the Pure Land practice, and they believe that if they repeat Amitabha's name, They go to the Pure Land and they get to continue their practice. So he's a Buddha that went and created a whole world for this to happen. One of the points of bringing that up is that, we hear about attachment and how, this idea that we have of how everything is kind of solid and we're separate and that's all over there and I'm either comfortable or not comfortable with it. That this is an illusion, we're told, and that all these forms, this is an illusion, that our idea of our solid separate identity is an illusion. And it turns out that all form is illusory. It's impermanent. So in a sense, it's false because it doesn't have a permanent existence in and of itself. So I marveled at in imparting or expounding the Absolute Truth of the Heart Sutra. At one point, I ran across the quote from Buddha Master that said, "And Amitabha created an illusory world. We created a world of form for beings who need that to go to practice Dharma. But it's illusory. It's impermanent, right? Because it's form." And he established a cause for it to exist. And as soon as that cause goes away, it ceases to exist. Cause and effect. So this Dharma path, to me, is starting to look like we're working to become masters of cause and effect. This is the world, this is the realm of cause and effect. And we're set on, to be creators. We're creators. So if we can master cause and effect in our own selves and our own lives, then the meaning of when Buddha Master says we move from having dharmas or phenomena influence our mind, we get to where, as masters of cause and effect, our minds begin to be able to manipulate dharma or phenomena. A little more than we bargained for, coming to Dharma talks at Heartwood, with Deepa just pretty much saying, you got a problem, take responsibility, So a lot to this. So now I have now I have this practice, and it's not done yet. I can think of other things I can add to my daily practice, but I'm somewhere, and I've got to manipulate and organize my life in such that maybe I'll make the leap to incorporating a new thing. That's what I've been doing all along, right? It's only recently that I even have an altar. That was suggested a long time ago. I had a virtual altar in my mind. I learned from the Lam Rim how to put it up in my mind. So I do prostrations and offerings and things like that. And pretty much the whole thing was in my mind. That's how we are, right? We're a little stuck in our ways. So and then, because I've got to find a place to put the altar and I've got to get the things to go on it. Well, then we had a retreat and we got the things to put on it. But then I still had to find a place for it. So it's only recently that I have actually have the altar set up. What a great thing. At any time I walk by it, I can whip off a practice. Whip off an offering. Yeah. But you see, I had to get there. Right? I had to get there. You know how I got there? I had to dust. I had to dust the room. And so to dust the room, I take everything off, I got to basically dismantle everything and you can dust. So I had to dust the room. So I had this bag of stuff that was from the retreat with all the fixins for the altar. And well, I might as well put it here. I was going to put it in another place, but then I talked to someone and they said, oh, no, can't be at the end of your feet when you're sleeping. Is that disrespectful? So that blew, the one spot that I thought I had for it. You see how we are? You see how things that shouldn't be difficult can be difficult, and we take time to get from where we are to the next place. So my point is not that I accomplished all this, but it's that as we give ourselves to the practice, that the Buddhas knew when they gave them to us that it would work inside of us and chip away at what we couldn't see was the problem. And so really, that little anecdote of mine about, sort of where I came from and what I have, is just testament that the practices work. But we have to pick them up. We do have to pick them up, and we have to make effort. When you're learning anything new, there might be a document, there might be some training, there might be a book. There's something to get over. There's something to learn, right? And I find that like these practices are like, oh, when you first get it, there's like 8 pages. This is my Dharma practice. It's like 8 pages long. And I'm not free to do the practices because I'm having to read this and I don't know it by heart. So what is the right day that I'm finally going to pick this up? Because I know it's there, right? So eventually I do. And now I know, okay. And I should know this already. I mean, I learned guitar. I didn't master it. But I know the effort that it takes to learn an instrument. You have to make the effort. You have to make effort. You learn 1 note, then 2, then 3, then 12. Learn a few chords. The next 7 or 8 chords might be like, oh crap, I wasn't expecting this. Hurdles to get over. Oh, now I can't play yet because I have to practice these scales, and I can't actually sort of improvise until I know something about where the notes are on the guitar. There's all these hurdles, right? So I know this from life, but that's how Dharma practice is too. But it's worth getting over, and we have our habits, each individually, with how we handle things like that, whether we procrastinate or jump right in. Some of us have a very sort of diligent, I have something I can do, or that I'm going to do, or that I was asked to do, or that I was told I should do, and so boom, I'm going to do it. I'm not that way. So things take me a little longer. But when I finally get to where I'm ready to adopt, I'm all in. Kind of in the same way that because I'm ready now. You see, the road has been prepared. Now I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Air in the tires. We're going to get on the bike and we can go now. Part of the problem is, from a practical standpoint, is, on one hand, none of this Buddhist stuff has to get done. I have to get my car inspected because once the date passes, if a sheriff shows up behind me, I have to get that done, right? So we learn to prioritize the things we have to get done. But this Buddhist stuff doesn't really have to get done. So it can kind of be difficult to prioritize. Venerable said in our last talk, if we were as fervent about our Dharma practice as we were about our otherworldly pursuits, then we'd make great progress in the Dharma. The guru that was part of the system I was in when I was in my 20s and 30s used to talk about, the great sort of, we just had the Tour de France, right? So you have the the marathoners and the great runners and all that. He said, if you just took all that skill, all that sort of know-how about how to sort of accomplish something like that and just shifted it to the practice of, in Buddhism, we call it the Dharma, you would fly. You would fly. So we know how to do this. We know how to apply effort, and we know that diligence is important. But when we're getting started, and for a long time, this Buddhist stuff can seem like it's optional. Optional. Could help, but I have time. I have time. So the Buddhists, from their perspective, and out of great compassion, knew something about this existence we're in here. And they went to great pains to try to make us aware of it, to give us a system of practice to help us solve it, to help us get out of this predicament we're in. Not only to see the problem, but to also sort of find our way out. So initially, practices kind of look like like we talked about before, cultivation. We call cultivation, right? Working with our behavior, our thoughts, our speech, our action. So we have things like the precepts and 10 wholesome characteristics and 6 paramitas, Brahma Viharas, right? Loving kindness and compassion and different practices to help us kind of get at those things and penetrate those things. 7 joint preliminary practices and other dharmas that Venerable, who's our teacher, may give us, knowing where we're at, right? Because she's ahead of us. So remember, those of us that are more experienced can see where the beginners are. I remember even when I was in the yoga program, in the meditation program, you could go to the ashram in New York, huge programs, huge programs. And so I'd be there, sitting for hours on my seat, with my straw mat, and, sitting for hours, no problem. I'm in my 20s. But also not fidgeting and able to focus on talk after talk after talk that led up to the guru's talk that might go on for an hour or so. And I would notice the ones that were new because they couldn't sit still. They didn't seem to be able to focus. Thankfully, in those days, there were no phones, right? I mean, they probably wouldn't let you in there with them anyways. And so you notice, good. So with a little more experience, I was able to see, oh, wow, they're struggling. And then I'm struggling with not feeling better than them, right? So we have these practices, and then so we get this. So we're focused on improving our lives at first, improving how our behavior keeps us out of trouble. Precepts and wholesome characteristics and right speech and all that stuff can be useful for that. Keep me out of trouble. And then inevitably they start punching in teachings that start to sound like, right, wouldn't it be great to sort of have others not suffer, not cause suffering for others? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, well, that can tie back to your behavior too. You've been working on that. You're good. just shift your focus from improving your life, now extend it to being a benefit to others. All the same work, all the same cultivation can be useful for that. And then we start to realize, wow, there really is something to this. And we have these teachings, and we have this wisdom, and we have these painstakingly detailed practices that we learn exist, some of which we take up, and we see the benefit of. We're like, wow, I've gotten something here. How do I get back? So then we start to get introduced to practices like taking refuge. Taking refuge. So, wow, I was on my own all this time. Life was what it was, but no great shakes, as my father used to say. No great shakes, right? But now I can see how this life can really become like a jewel, and I can be a jewel in the world. Wow. So I really want to give myself over to this now. Now I'm ready. You see, the day one at Heartwood, I wouldn't have been ready for that. Give myself over, surrender. No, I'm going to take a few things that might help me overcome my anxiety at work. Meditation might help with that, right? So, it's about me first, and then sort of I start to kind of think about others a little bit and realize, oh yeah, those same actions that are harming me, yeah, this isn't going to help my wife either. So that's good. But now I want to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I'm going to demonstrate that with certain practices. We have certain practices we do. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. With prostration practices. And in the beginning, believe it or not, these represent hurdles to us. Right? They're kind of hurdles until we understand that, wait, I am suffering. I see a way out of suffering. I'm grateful for the teachings that I have and the teacher and the Sangha that I have. I am actually grateful for this. I'm ready to actually take refuge and give my mind over. Let my life be lived through the filter of the teachings and the Dharma, and really taking refuge in saying, hey, Buddhas, I'm guessing you achieved something, you showed it to us, and you left. I'm guessing you're not gone. I just can't see you, right? So I'm going to say, help me. Take refuge in the Buddha. Let my mind be your mind. I'm not trying to hold on anymore. Same with the Dharma. Take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings, and the Sangha. So so taking refuge is truly giving ourselves over to be transformed. And giving ourselves over to a mystery that we don't quite fully understand. But we're starting to see progress. Right? This is how it works for me. Evidence is cause for the next step, right? So this is how it works for me. Maybe some people are able to just sort of, buy into this altogether from the beginning. But for me, part of the reason I guess Buddhism appeals to me is because it's an evidence-based path. Buddha didn't say, he didn't, like Bhanyavadi says, he didn't go doink and you're solved, first of all, right? And he's not forcing anybody to do anything. So, and then we have other things like we make offages and pay homage to those that have gone before, those that we learn about from the teachings, other accomplished holy beings. We have them in many religions. It's not just Buddhism. We pay homage. Sounds kind of cultish, right? Um, and so these practices like offerings, and we have our altar practice, and there's certain ways of treating. We have icons on the altar that represent, these various beings, and those beings represent aspects of our true essence that we'd like to develop. It's really all it is. We're not worshiping icons. We're worshiping, and we're learning to sort of pay homage to something that we're starting to really value, really value, really value, because we've seen the benefit. See, we didn't lose our selfish mind. We're just feeding it stuff that now is, well, I can go with that. Yeah, I see the benefit there. We're still in our selfish mind, right? We're still all self-attached in the room. But we're kind of tricking it into getting to a place where it's no longer selfish at all. And then we're just completely available to help in the universe in whatever way is needed. It's only this limited sort of self that thinks so, has such a low opinion of itself, really, that thinks that's a problem to go into the universe and take on some of the challenges that might exist out there. Suppose I don't want to do that. Suppose I get tired of it. These are all things that happen in our self-attached state, right? So we can't judge becoming a bodhisattva and what that might mean from this. We just can't. But having taken up the practices that lead to becoming a bodhisattva, I can tell you that they do lead to freedom. And for me, it's a relative thing right now, but it's real. So the practices are worthwhile because they are leading us somewhere, in my experience. So anytime we receive something in the world, we might feel gratitude and we might want to give back, right? So that's all we're doing with the teachings and the teachers, some of which are in our life physically, some of which are not. But if we assume that the Buddhas don't exist anymore, then what's the point of us trying to become a Buddha? So I've really, really, really come to feel that, we have help. We have lots of help. There's a gentleman named Jim Finley, who I mentioned from time to time when I'm in this chair. He runs a podcast called Turning to the Mystics. And he looks at all the Christian mystics and he does a podcast on each one and they talk about the teachings they gave and all that sort of stuff. But he was, we were listening to him one time and he was talking about, the connectedness, the real connectedness that we're in here, even though we think you're separate, you're separate, you're separate. I have no hair, you some hair, that we're all just really, connected, and that all this difference and separation and this isolation that we feel isn't really true at all, and that there are tons of beings around us right now, all kinds of beings, even holy beings, and that as we embark on the path with our sincerity, that sincerity attracts the attention of some of those beings. And so it's a matter of faith, but I really, really believe that as I go along, as I'm asked to do something like this, that I have help. The stuff that comes through me when I'm preparing something like this, sometimes on a day's notice, I got help. Can't even take credit. I mean, I got help somehow. Something came through. But so all that's needed oftentimes is, Jim Finley's teacher said that it was Thomas Merton, and he used to say all the time that he said, a little sincerity with God goes a long way, a long, long way. He says a little sincerity goes a long, long way. So it's that sincerity to really be a benefit in the world, to offer something useful here today that goes out beyond us and reaches those that can help. I mean, we went to Colorado and California, and even the monastics went and spent time at the temple in California. And is this phenomenon, what is it called? Trees. Amrita. There's this phenomenon called Amrita that spontaneously occurs where there's this nectar-like substance that's not of this world that begins to fall because of the sincerity of what's happening in the place where that's happening. In the case of the monastics, they were there and they were going through a series of, a 7-day retreat and offering themselves the best they could to it, going through all the same struggles we're talking about here, offer themselves the best they could through it, to it. But that sincerity brought the holy beings to give a sign. Amrita. So there's something to this. There's something to this. And if we expect there to be help for us, then might we one day be the help that some other being's looking for? And these offerings, Venerable says all the time, there's nothing from this world that we have that's of any use to the Buddhas. They don't need anything we have. But it's a sweetening of our mind and our heart. It really benefits us. So all the resistance we go through to worry, just like a cult, when we start worshiping, all this that we go through is our own resistance based upon our own sort of past history with things, right? Some of it justified. But the Buddhists need none of what we have to offer. But the reason we offer both ourselves and anything we have, a flower, a grape, is because that's what we have. Even if, we try to imagine the greatest offerings, a mountain of gold and all these things, the best things we could imagine, take a whole galaxy. The best we can come up with, we offer from the goodness of our heart. And listen, it's trivial, but, it's like when the one that has nothing gives the 50 cents that they have, right? So we're trying to develop that heart of sincerity and gratitude for what we have, which in the case of what we're talking about here is the Dharma. And then, of course, we contemplate and meditate, contemplate ideas designed to break down our sticky attachments kind of from the inside without us knowing what they're really doing. But these practices are designed by holy beings that got to where we're trying to go and said, this is the only way to unwind your predicament. This is the only way to do it. Not the only way, but this will work, right? So there's a science here. So it is a science. I mean, these practices are scientific in the sense that they're designed to lead us beyond our ordinary mind. Gently, gently, because we won't be pushed. Last thing we want to do is raise the ire of this self-defending self, right? I mean, the last thing we want to do is slow things right down. Gently, gradually over time, because they know it's the only way it's going to work. Ultimately, by giving ourselves to these things, we gain confidence and experience that there really is something beyond this kind of duality of pain and pleasure that was up till now our normal experience. There really is something beyond that. There is a way to live this life that is much better than that, much freer than that. So, the purpose of this talk is to talk about the benefit of practice and how it sort of takes us and kind of the science that's working under the covers for these practices that seem, sometimes, I've done this a million times, right? And I'm having trouble focusing because my mind's on other things because this is so easy now. I have this. So we're constantly struggling with our mind, but we have these practices. But I wanted to just sort of touch on how we can kind of maybe see these practices as science. So I picked the 7 joint preliminary practices, which is the first mind essence from the supreme and unsurpassable Mahamudra of liberation given to us by Buddha Master. And this is a teaching I think we've shared. So I'm not. Anyways, so this we've Venerable's given us this teaching from this podium. So we contemplate things that the Buddhists tell us are important for us to penetrate, that will take us beyond our concrete way of seeing things. First is, this life is like a dream. So we sit with that idea for a while. And one of the ways I'm doing it now is, this life is like a dream. So in a dream, I have therapy now. So this is a Jungian analyst I'm working with, and she wants me to record, as many dreams as record my dreams. And so we can use them as part of our work together. So dreams are top of mind for me. So life is like a dream. So in a dream, a whole scene sets up, first of all. There are things in it, there are buildings in it, there are roadways, vehicles, people, other things, animals are all there. There's a kind of a plot line, a story that's happening. We're having an experience in it. We're in it. We're having an experience in it. We're having feelings. We're reacting to some of what's happening in the dream. And then at the end of the dream, we wake up, right? So now the dream's over. The entire scene collapses. All of the people, things, animals, everything collapses, ceases to exist. It's gone. Even our memory of it pretty quickly often fades, right? Sometimes we wake up, we know we were dreaming, but we just can't remember anything about it. So our memory of it fades. What we're left with oftentimes from a dream might be the feelings. Oh, that was a bad dream. You wake up with a feeling of dread. Can't remember the dream, but you wake up with a feeling of dread. Or, that was a great dream. I would love to get back to that dream. You wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and then you have this great dream. so want to get back into that dream. So the analogy that I've come up with is that, sort of if this life is like that dream, then, this life is like an appearance, like it happens in the dream. All of you are part of the play. I'm part of the play. Things happen like they do in dreams, sometimes helter-skelter. Sometimes I walk into a day, I don't know what's going to happen. Boom. Wow. I'm worried about that thing for the next week. I didn't know that was going to happen that day. It's like a dream. How is this happening? But like in a dream, we talked about those 8 worldly concerns. All of those concerns were not useful. Everything we gathered in this life, everything we got, everything we accomplished, kind of stays here. We can't take any of that with us. What we're left with is the karma, which is my equivalent to the feelings we're left with out of a dream. It's the thing that sticks with us, even if we don't remember the details of the dream. So when we leave this life, we're not likely to remember the details of this life. But what we're left with is the feelings and the effects of what we did in this life and how that sort of is tied to us. So that's kind of how I approach that. So it's doable. First, it seems like, oh, geez, what do you want from me? Life is like a dream. Well, sure it is. Can I be done? But the more we do this and come up with different ways to look at it, the more we're penetrating something that the Buddhists tell us is important, and that helps to chip away at our attachment to the way we think things are in this life, with our perception and our views and our past knowledge. Then we have, the next is the preciousness of this human life. So we go from, yep, this life is like a dream, but it's real and it's precious. And we should take advantage of it. Preciousness of these. So we think about preciousness of its human life. How is it precious? Why is it precious? And that might evolve over time for us. First, we might not have any ideas about why it's precious. But when we start to realize that this is a place to work out the Dharma, and that a hell realm might not be, and they say the God realm is too cushy for anybody to be motivated to do anything, right? So their karma just runs out. If they're lucky, they end up here, because we have this balance of pleasure and pain, and we get to kind of make choices that can lead more towards one or the other. And we get to practice Dharma that can take us out of the whole system of duality in the first place. So precious, precious. The availability of true Dharma. Look, we moved to Hendersonville unbeknownst to us. We had this Sangha. We have Venerable. We had Panyadipa. We have monastics here. With this whole Sangha meets regularly, holds different programs. People participate in different practices and things like that. Diligent about sharing and practicing the Dharma. We have this. And we have the teachings of a Buddha who lived in this world and out of great compassion, but no real benefit of his own that you could decipher. If you're a calculating kind of person and you looked at the kind of life they were like, I don't know what he got out of that, right? And he would tell you that. He does. And some of this is like, I don't get anything out of this. But out of great compassion, because he knows something about our condition and he wants to help. Teach. So we have those teachings. And we have a Sangha that uses those teachings. And we have a teacher that's ahead of us to help us understand those teachings. Things that come out of a mind of a Buddha. Look what came out, the Heart Sutra. Did you get that the first time you read it? That came out of the mind of a Buddha. So in raw form, but Buddha Master made the great effort with great compassion to try to put in layman's language these very profound teachings to allow us to walk along in the way that we do, in the stodgy kind of way that we do in this life with this mind. He still couldn't give us the experience, but he could give us enough that once in a while, as we're walking the path, doing the practices that are prescribed, we look in that book on page 34, like the book of Narnia in Disney, right? The letters jump right off the page. And now we've got something that takes us further down the path. Or I was wondering about that fork that was coming up. Now I know which way to go. And that's how the path works. It isn't like magic, really. And it's magic because we kind of don't understand how it's working, because we don't understand exactly what the problem is. We believe it now. We believe there's a problem. And we're starting to experience levels of the problem, layers of the problem. But at the level of profundity that a Buddha would understand it, would see it, we don't really understand it. So then we go from there. So we had life as a dream, but precious, availability of Dharma to make best use of this life, and then impermanence and transmigration. Impermanence, the Buddha Master says in the Dharma of Cultivation, first must penetrate impermanence. Without a mind of impermanence, I mean, literally, you just don't understand the predicament you're in. Why would you practice Buddhism? You just wouldn't. You wouldn't do it. So they understand our mind. You see, they understand how the mind works. There's some commonality in how all of our minds work, and these teachings are designed to sort of get at those things. So they ask us to look at impermanence. What does it mean to you, impermanence? Yep, things, decay, they go in the ground. Plastic doesn't. But, right, and then transmigration. Really kind of getting at transmigration. Didn't always kind of know what to do with it, but lately, just sitting, I watched my father go through it. I was there the last 10 days of his life. I saw his body get weaker and weaker and weaker. I saw how, at the end, his body was so weak, couldn't lift a finger, wouldn't even want to open his eyes. Why would he? Too much effort, right? So this is where we're headed. And then to realize, oh, and when this body finally does give up the ghost, and maybe we're having one of those experiences where we're looking back on our body. Oh, wow. This body's been a great refuge. It's been a great home. We're comfortable with it. We're comfortable here. We're comfortable living here. No matter what we thought of our body before, great home. Fingers all crooked from arthritis. Doesn't matter anymore. Man, that was a great home. Now I'm out. Now I'm out on my own. What now? What next? Floating. Do I have a body? I don't even know. Where am I going? What's next? What'll happen to me? Will anybody come? Will I have help? So this is how we might contemplate transmigration. Some of these things are designed to sort of let us know you don't have as much time as you think. And this could be over just like this. You said this was a precious human life because you could practice the Dharma. Practice the Dharma. And then, looking at karmic retribution, getting real about, okay, my life is a certain way. What I'm experiencing now in my life is the fruit of karma that I've either created in this life, cause and effect, or in past lives. So I can look at that and see, and that informs a little bit about how I am, how I've been, how I can be better. It starts to kind of get at what's really happening here, what really happened. Getting honest. And then my karmic conditions. Usually when I get to the my karmic conditions part, after the previous part, I'm like, but still, my karmic conditions are very good. I have the Sangha. I have these teachings. I have a teacher, right? My karmic conditions are very good. I have the means. I'm in retirement. My karmic conditions are very good right now for learning Dharma, which is becoming more and more just the priority. So you see how we go from all that resistance, first visit to Heartwood, running out of there in case anybody would talk to me, to what an opportunity this is. That's the value of practice. So I like to understand, because I'm an engineer, I like to understand what our practices do for us. So I have so this joint preliminary practices is something that is considered a preliminary practice. I have another Dharma practice that I was given by Venerable that includes certain teachings, and I review that each time I do my practice. And part of it is what's called Tsongkhapa's reversals. And there are 11 of them, but I just picked a few. That lets me know, if I didn't already get it, the value of some of what we asked to do, possibly in other practices. It says the meditation on precious human life reverses our previous lack of interest in Dharma practice. Meditation on precious human life, the value of this human life, reverses our previous lack of interest in Dharma practice. Meditation on impermanence reverses worldly concerns and our attachment to the things of this life. Meditation on the disadvantages of samsara reverses our previous lack of renunciation, this desire to leave, this state, this way of being. The practice of bodhicitta reverses our self-cherishing mind, which Lama Zopa Rinpoche wrote a book on bodhicitta, very eloquent, about 150 pages, wonderful. And in it, he makes pretty clear that all of the problems in the world stem from the self-cherishing mind. All of the trouble in the world stems from the self-cherishing mind. The practice of bodhicitta reverses our self-cherishing mind, so we can stop contributing to the problem. It's kind of the best we can do, right? We can't force people to practice Dharma. We can make it available to them, but we can't force them to do it. So the best we can do is remove ourselves from the equation by reversing our self-cherishing mind by the practice of bodhicitta. And then the practice of emptiness reverses our self-grasping. I had, I guess, what I might call an experience of emptiness in my Dharma practice meditation one morning, where I got up from the meditation not feeling like anything was particularly different. But when I got up and went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea, I didn't have my ordinary mind. I had the same mind I was sitting with before. And the words that rang through my head was, all of this is unnecessary. That all this struggle and strife is unnecessary. So I guess I got a glimpse, and I didn't know what to make of it, but I guess I got a glimpse of the emptiness of everything that we're so involved in as we live this life. That on some level, it's not only not necessary, like it's not even true, like it's not real, it's false. So the practice of emptiness reverses our self-grasping. So this tendency to want to protect and hang on, right? There's a state where I'll see this differently, or I can see this differently. And I remember the state, I remember it, and I remember that experience, and I refer to it when I feel myself getting caught up, I can remember. So even though I'm not living in that same experience perpetually, still, it's a marker on the path, right? And I can remember that sign. Um, so, and then we have, so I like that, Tsongkhapa's teachings show me the value of that contemplation practice. In fact, when I have the Dharma practice, and it has a set of preliminaries in it, and then I added some of the offerings and things like that, prostrations and whatnot. I added some of that to it, so now I have this. And then because for so long I was reviewing this, as soon as I ran into this Tsongkhapa's reversals, and I run into them every time I do that practice, it occurred to me, oh, I should incorporate 7 joint preliminary practices, which I used to practice, as a preliminary to a meditation session or something. I should add that back in, because those themes that I was contemplating are useful, right? It says here, are useful. So I've added it back in. I find that between the sort of the preliminary practices, the refuge practices, the prostration, things like all this sets me up to have an ever deeper experience when I finally get to kind of the point where I can just sort of sit with a visualization and then and a meditation, that I'm that much more ready for that part, because my mind is so concentrated up to that point. So these things not only benefit our understanding of the predicament we're in, but they also help us concentrate. And I find even in sort of normal life, when it comes time to visualize something or to imagine something, I'm pretty quick at it, where I was never considered myself a visual person in that way. And if you asked me you put me in a seminar and you said, okay, when are we going to visualize? I'd be like, oh, it's terrible. Can't do it. So, and well, that was part of the trepidation going into the Dharma practice in the first place. You can imagine when I first got it, I mean, to visualize mantras and this and that. I'm like, you don't know who you're dealing with. But you see how we experience resistance from what we already know about ourselves. And we don't believe this, we don't immediately believe there's another way to be, unless we've been in the practice of giving ourselves over, taking refuge. So there's a science to this, and Buddha Master makes it very clear in Dharma cultivation that there is a science to cultivation. And he stresses in what he calls the 8 right views that we must penetrate the meaning of impermanence. We must develop a mind of impermanence. A mind that truly penetrates that truth. As a priority, Like, unless we have that, everything else is going to be a little wishy-washy. But we don't stop other things just to wait for that, because we don't quite know where the end is there. So we work on that, but we also do the other practices, because we get a lot of parts of our mind to sweeten and correct. And all these practices kind of work on all those different parts simultaneously. We must have a mind of true belief in the sufferings of samsara that are caused by impermanence. Like, we don't just sort of like think it's a good idea. Like, we really, really, truly believe in the sufferings of samsara. Now I'm starting to see the sufferings of samsara. Not, I can see it now. It's not hard for me to believe anymore. I don't have to believe it. I can see it more and more. So that one's becoming pretty easy. And then renunciation, a mind that's determined to leave samsara. And then a mind with true vows, that says a mind determined to act based upon the above views. True vows, that's a thing, right? Vows. You want to find out if you got any resistance left? Consider a vow. You'll find out where you're at. Vows are interesting. Mind of diligence, right? So we need to have a persistent approach and effort to our practice. Precepts, we need to cultivate in the right direction. We don't want to cultivate making bombs to blow up the world. That's cultivation too, but that's not what we're after. We're cultivating according to the principles of Buddhism. So correct cultivation. And dhyana and samadhi are the causes for wisdom then. And bodhicitta is then the cause for leading. So you see, all this is working with cause and effect. And some of it's going inside of us and working with cause and effect. And we come to trust that these things are worthwhile for us to practice because well, I could start to see the value in them. I could start to see the truth in them. And I got them at a time when that was more true than it would have been on day one. You see how Venerable gives us practices when we're ready. So I'm ready. So that way, we don't get turned off because we get turned off. Mine will turn off just like that. It's interesting. We worry about if I'm resolved to leave, then what does that mean about my son or my daughter? You know, am I leaving everything behind? So more and more, I'm resolved to leave. I'm resolved to follow this path to wherever it leads me. Which I find from a recent experience with my son makes me freer to be more fully present with him because all that self-concern, whatever amount of it I've overcome, makes me more available to him. And, right? And my concern has shifted now, not a concern, like an overbearing concern, but that he have a good day. Pressure's off. All this contriving, oh, it's Father's Day, we need to make it something. What will I say? Say this, you know, a list of things. Or paper, pull out. Right? The way we contrive and try to control and make something out of these situations, we're learning are part of the attachment spectrum that we've kind of partly released. And so as we learn to release all that, we become freer. And so the people we interact with are also free of us, with our overbearing, controlling, suggestive ways, right? Free of us. So already a benefit to the world. We get a little free, we're already a benefit to the world. We're worried about becoming a bodhisattva and freeing all living beings from our little mind here that's like too much to consider. Put that on the shelf. But as we become the light, then our light shining reminds others of the light that they have. to the extent that they can recognize it wherever they are. For those that are a little more ready, they might actually inquire. Want to get to know you a little bit. Oh, and what's that heartwood? Oh, can I come there? Sure. So all we can do, there's all this, it has assassination attempts. There's all this division, and it's something to worry about. But all we can do is free ourselves. It's really the only thing we can do. We cannot free anyone else from the struggle and strife of this world. We can only free ourselves. But in freeing ourselves, we free others from us. And if we can model that freedom, and we're not a controlling force in other people's lives, then they might kind of pick up that thread themselves. I like when Joe's around. Or I don't mind when Joe's around like I used to. Right? That could be the history. So the benefits of practice, I just wanted to make clear that, we can't solve the problems of the world. There's a sort of an activism that we all have in us that wants to run out and get involved. We can't solve and approach the world's problems with the mind that we have, with this deluded state of mind that we have. We're only going to become part of the problem. All we can do is work to free ourselves and be the model for that in whatever circles we run. And manage our own minds. Manage our own minds. I walk out to tennis and I bring up something I heard on the news. I just destroyed everybody's experience. Just like that. That's how powerful it is. So by pulling myself out of that, might seem like I'm kind of taking a pass. But no, it's a very, very active form of beneficial participation in the world. So these practices, we're trying to get to our true authenticity, become more spontaneous, less contriving, be with the world as it is, be in the world as we are. Learn to trust that planting good causes works. It's the world of cause and effect. Why not hack that? Right? Why not hack that to benefit ourselves and the world? Cause and effect. It's not just that when you call out the president of Israel that he's going to react in a certain way, that's cause and effect. But it's also that if we plant good causes with our practice and in our lives and with the people we interact with, then that'll generate good effects. Not just for us, but as a way of serving others. We serve others. And I mentioned, how for me it leads to benefits, concentration, learning to cherish and, really cherish and care for others, withdraw from the struggle and strife, not so much to do, not so much for others to do with you. I hope the choir notices. But it's true, when we become free, we free others. We really do, we free others. So last words on practice, don't worry about what you don't understand about your practice. Be curious, ask questions as you need to get started. Keep that curious mind open. Read something to support. So, preliminary practices, what am I supposed to be doing? How do I do this? What's my mindset when I'm doing it? I use the Lam Rim to help me with that. Pabonga, does a great job. He did a 21-day retreat to talk about the Lam practices, which are, those practices, the benefit of them, how to do them, what's the mindset, in a great deal of detail. So I use that to supplement what I'm doing. I don't need the book. Once I read it and understand that, I take that into how I use my mind to do my practice. So there are other resources that we can use. Venerable's here to kind of point and get us started, but it's up to us to make something of this. We really do need to make something of it for ourselves. And for me, it's I'm finding that it's Venerable talks all the time about how it's fun to find ways to cut off our self-attachments. It's fun to see our attachment let it go. Whether it happens right away or not, it's kind of fun to see. Another thing that I can work on in the Dharma. Boy, I was getting bored there. Got another thing. But once we begin to able to kind of start to see our own pain through cultivation and fully learn to sort of see our part in the pain that we experience and that we might cause others, it's the beginning of that self-attachment weakening, right? Because underlying all of this is some attachment somewhere in there that we don't quite put our finger on. But as we continue to sort of do this work and identify, oh, well, I can see the self-attachment there. I can see why I want this outcome. I can see why. But can I let go of that long enough to see what the real outcome should be? Or at least put it on the shelf, right? So we work with our self-attachment. We learn to identify it, and that's what the practices help us do. And just, keep an eye out for signs of progress. We need one another. I mentioned the choir. Well, hopefully they're seeing how much less of a pain in the ass I am these days versus a year ago or 2 years ago, right? They're looking at me like, well, I don't know. But not, just learning not to inject myself so much or, have so much to say about what I know. If it's beneficial, let me add it. If not, let me hold it. So anyways, so that's that. But keep an eye out for signs of progress. I was with my son and, we had a great day. And the feedback I got was, wow, Dad's in a really great headspace. He was thrilled. He had such a great day. He was so free. Free. But notice those things. So that was a testament to me of the value of the cultivation work that I've been doing and seeing my self-attachment and trying to eradicate what I can. I can see big self-attachments and I just can't even tackle. I mean, they're just there. I can't tackle them yet, right? So we, sometimes we see when you can't do anything about it. It's okay. It's okay. Be so hard on ourselves, but keep an eye out for signs of progress. Even without others to tell you, you'll see that I'm different in this situation. You'll see, oh, I used to get nervous about this. Laissez-faire attitude now. Laissez-faire. I'm good. Come what may. Ooh, Venerable was up here one time, so I almost said come what may. No. Not come what may, but we'll bring it on. That's the other one, right? Bring it on. I'm ready. So it makes me think about, that being a recluse and going into a cave to practice Dharma. How would that work? You wouldn't have any testing. You wouldn't have anybody to sort of indicate your progress. You wouldn't have any how would that work? You might become a great meditator, but I'm not sure, with the full system that we have here that includes cultivation, for which we need people, and for which in this precious human life, we need this human laboratory. It's missing a whole chunk of the human laboratory if you go into a cave and isolate yourself, right? Not to mention, you're not sharing yourself in the freedom you're gaining for the benefit of anybody else. So the value of this laboratory, our teacher, our Sangha, all cultivating, all gentle with one another. Can someone offer merit?
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Lace them up. The creative wisdom of the musicians comes to me. Start with the man in the mirror. Polish that mirror. Polish it with a smile on your face, with love in your heart. Go to the bare necessities. And when you're singing out of tune, get by with a little help from your friends, even when you don't know who they are.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all.